Video's not clickbait. I'm likely done running pre-written adventures for the foreseeable future, if not forever. I've been playing 5th edition D&D for almost its entire cycle, about 8 years. The first D&D campaign I ever ran was Storm King's Thunder, and after that I kept doing more and more pre-writtens one after another, going to Curse of Strahd, going to Dragonlance, going to Avernus, and so on and so forth. Not every pre-written I ran was my favorite, and not every pre-written I ran was awful. Most of them were decent, but it was the players that made them the best they could be. And I'm sure that's the same for most Dungeon Masters out there. In fact, most Dungeon Masters, according to recent statistics, choose to play in homebrew worlds of their own rather than pre-written adventures, which honestly surprises me. I assumed it would be the other way around. Because you see, for me, I really enjoyed running these pre-written adventures because it keeps the prep time pretty minimal. Magic items, story plots, characters, directions, all of that is handled by the book. Now, of course, you can add your own things to them, and I did that all the time in all of my pre-writtens, but nonetheless, I did really enjoy gathering these pre-writtens and running them for my players and telling different unique stories each time. But now, that's over. It's the end of an era, for me and for Wizards. Because if you don't know, Wizards of the Coast has released brand new rules for Dungeons & Dragons. It's technically still 5th edition, but with a new coat of paint over it. And with these new rules, they also made this the last campaign written with the old rules. They did say you could run this with the new rules if you wanted to, but I had a better idea. I've had plans in the back of my mind for many, many years that eventually I wanted to act upon, but it would need to be the right time, the right place, and the right people. And after talking to some people, I finally decided, after this, I'm going to make a big change in my life. This is likely going to be the last pre-written I run for a very long time. Because now that this adventure is over, I'm starting a new one. And I'm going where I haven't gone in a very, very long time. As you see, I've been playing D&D for 8 years now, and over that time I've done nothing but exclusively pre-written campaigns for almost every single D&D game I've ever run. I did take a small break running pre-writtens, and I did run my own homebrew campaign for a couple of months many, many years ago, but you know, due to many different factors that I'm sure many DMs have faced over the years, it kind of fizzled out, and I went back to running pre-writtens. And I've had my up and downs with pre-writtens, and I've made reviews for most of them. Some of them dedicated reviews, and some of them just, you know, put in the tier list. You can check out that video here. But with the launch of Vecna Eve of Ruin and how it was going to be the last pre-written for 2014 D&D, I really wanted to run it, and I had a group of players who were eager to play in it, and we put a new spin on it. Everyone could only play characters that they had previously played in different D&D games that never got an ending. So that way, my players who didn't get an end to the characters they wanted to, you know, write their stories for, could play in this campaign and finish their stories that way. And I knew that was going to be my last pre-written campaign, mainly because it's the last of those, you know, that were made during 2014, but I had a plan for a new homebrew game and a new homebrew campaign that I wanted to run using the new rules. So unfortunately, drama channels, I did not quit D&D pre-writtens because I just don't want to run them anymore or anything. I've simply run most of them that I wanted to, and now I'm going to be setting sail and moving on to running my own homebrew game. But even though that chapter closes, we still need to review it. I reviewed Dragonlance, I reviewed Avernus, I reviewed Curse of Strahd, I reviewed many of them, and I'm going to review Vecna because I really enjoyed Vecna. It had a lot of misleading promotional around it, but the game itself, I really enjoyed, and so did my players. There are aspects about it I didn't enjoy as much, but no game is perfect. So let's soak in the sun and talk about Vecna Eve of Ruin, the last pre-written campaign that I'm probably ever going to have run. Mother Nature had other plans, and it started to rain. So we're inside now. Chapter 1, Return from Never Death's Graveyard, is the only chapter in this entire book that I actually did not run. The reasoning for that is, if you are familiar with Wizards of the Coast pre-written adventures, it's the tutorial chapter. Almost every single pre-written adventure that Wizards of the Coast makes will have 1 or 2 chapters that are meant to fast track you either to 3rd level or to the level the campaign wants you to be, and gets you up to speed in a very quick and easy manner. Think Death House from Curse of Strahd, or Greenest from Tyranny of Dragons, or Moonstone from Storm of King's Thunder. Those are all tutorial adventures meant to get you through the ranks really quickly and get a brief idea of what you're going to be dealing with, and then the campaign proper begins. But there's actually another reason I didn't run Chapter 1 in Vecna, is because Chapter 1 is primarily meant to get you connected to Vecna. Because you see, your characters in this adventure are going to be linked to Vecna in a very special magical way. Because as your characters learn certain secrets throughout this adventure, they'll be able to use those secrets against Vecna in the future. But the only reason they can learn these secrets and use them as powerful secrets against him is by being linked to him, because he's the god of secrets. Because when I told my group that we were going to be playing Vecna and that the campaign actually starts at 10th level, one of my players brought up the idea of, hey, can we just bring back old characters that never actually had their stories finished yet? And before I even had the book, I was like, you know what? That's actually a dope idea. Everyone gets to play characters from previous campaigns that didn't get to finish their stories, and they can bring those characters back into this campaign and finally have an end to their story. So no one got to make new characters. Everyone had to play old characters from previous games. And if they were different levels, like if they were way below 10th when it ended, or if they were almost like 20th when it ended, they just had to shuffle their levels around and be at 10th level when we started. And because chapter 1 is meant to get your group together and get them linked to Vecna, and then the proper campaign begins, I decided to run it a little bit differently. I had everybody be yoinked from their respective timelines wherever they were when their campaigns got, finished. And then they all showed up at the very start of chapter 2, linked to Vecna already, because the multiverse and the Weave itself secretly chose them as the heroes to save the world, which isn't too dissimilar from what happens in the book. Because you see, in chapter 1, if you're all running brand new characters, your characters start at 10th level, where you're already well-made heroes with lots of backstory and lots of victories under your belt. And you are in the city of Neverwinter on the Sword Coast, and you are looking into a bunch of noble disappearances that are happening quite frequently. And as you go looking for these lost nobles, you eventually find the cult of Vecna performing a ritual to extract secrets. And as you try and stop this cult from doing this and save the nobles, you get teleported into a mirror dimension of Neverwinter called like Gloom City or something. Hold on, what's this place called? Evernight. Gloom City. Jesus Christ. You get teleported to a mirror dimension of Neverwinter called Evernight. Neverwinter, Evernight. I just made that connection now. Oh my god. But once you've wrapped up chapter 1 and you've, stopped the cult and you've rescued the nobles, you then get sent to one of the coolest places in all of Forgotten Realms. And that's Sigil. Now, Sigil, for those who don't know, is a very interesting location. It is essentially the center of all known worlds. The City of Doors is another name for it. It is an area where no gods can enter. Gods are forbidden from coming in and out of this place, but anything can come here. Devils, demons, angels, celestials, anything you can think of, they are allowed to be here, and a lot of them come here and just, blow off steam and enjoy themselves. It is not unknown to see devils and angels at the same table having a drink together. Sigil is a wildly, really cool place at the center of like all known worlds and everything. And you and your party are teleported here by what is known as the Wizards 3. The Wizards 3 being Mordenkainen, Alestriel Silverhand, and Tasha the Witch. 3 very powerful wizards who already know about Vecna and his plans to reshape the multiverse into his design, so they decide to all 3 of them simultaneously cast the Wish spell to try and destroy Vecna and stop this from happening. But if you're familiar with the Wish spell, you know that even if you word it perfectly, you never get exactly what you wish for. There's always a slight twist to it. And the twist to this Wish spell is that the 3 of them cast Wish to save the multiverse and get rid of Vecna, and what actually happens is it summons your party to the City of Doors, and they land at the Wizards 3's doorstep, and they take this as a sign that the Weaves of Magic has chosen this group as the only ones who can actually stop Vecna. They are the literal manifestation of the 9th level Wish spell simultaneously cast by 3 of the most powerful wizards in all of the known worlds. So no pressure. Now from this point forward, heavy spoiler warning. So if you are planning on playing in this adventure, or you want to play in this adventure someday, this is your stopping point. If you want to run it someday, you're going to need to know this. Ready? Okay. Mordenkainen's not actually Mordenkainen. He's Koss the Vampire in disguise. Who's that? Welcome to history. Vecna used to be a very powerful human wizard on the land of Orith, the same place that Mordenkainen is from, and the same place that Kos the Betrayer is from. Kos and Vecna grew up together, and while Kos became a very good sword fighter, Vecna became an extremely powerful wizard. But his power really knew no bounds, and he became stronger and stronger, and he began to overthrow councils of wizards that he was a part of. And to make a long story short, Kos was eventually drafted into Vecna's army as Vecna's right-hand man, but over many years of servitude and bloodshed and watching Vecna's just growth spiral out of control and his wanting of godhood through lichdom, Kos decides enough is enough, and he betrays Vecna. He takes his sword against him, and he cuts him down to ribbons. The only thing left is his left eye and his left hand, which is why whenever you hear about Vecna, you are always associating him with either the eye of Vecna or the hand of Vecna, like the cover of the book would suggest. The left hand and his left eye. There's also the end of Critical Role Campaign 1, where Archon the Cruel takes the hand of Vecna for himself, lops off his own hand, and attaches it to himself. And this happened in a homebrew campaign that Wizards of the Coast later made canon. If you run Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus, you can find Archon the Cruel in that campaign, and he does indeed have the left hand of Vecna on himself, which is wild to think about, but that's a different campaign. If you want to learn more about that adventure, you can check out that video here. Now, Vecna at that point had already achieved lichdom, so you could never fully destroy Vecna. He was only destroyed for a certain amount of time before he would eventually come back. And now is the time he has come back. And Cass, eager as always, wants to be the one to destroy Vecna and take over the multiverse for himself. But in order to do that, he needs a certain army at his side, and in order to do that, he needs a certain key, which is where you guys come in. Because you see, the wish spell didn't work as intended, not because it's the wish spell, but because Mordenkainen, who's actually cast the Betrayer in disguise, deceived the two wizards and altered the wish spell as it was being cast. How? I don't know, that's just what the book says. And in doing so, the wish spell then summons you guys instead of doing what it was supposed to. But now that you're all here, Kos, who's Mordenkainen to everybody, takes the opportunity to say this. I worried that perhaps our wish wouldn't stop one as powerful as Vecna. Alestriel, please forgive me, but I did plan a contingency. Vecna is too powerful to stop directly at this point. However, no power is absolute. I suspect Vecna will be vulnerable while he reaves his ritual. If you can confront and weaken him, this chime of exile can banish him to Orith. He would no longer be able to affect multiple realms at once. His plan to remake the multiverse would fail. There is also an artifact that is, I believe, the only way to weaken Vecna, so the chime can be used against him. It's called the Rod of Seven Parts. Unfortunately, its component pieces are scattered across existence. While my esteemed colleagues researched the magic needed to cast a wish spell powerful enough to stop Vecna, I looked into finding the rod pieces should we need them. The first piece is deep in the Underdark, somewhere inside a hidden safe house for worshippers of the demon god Lolth. Web's Edge, it's called. Find that first piece of the rod, my friends. The portal on the dais will take you to it. Once you locate the first piece, the magic inherent in the artifact will point you to the second piece, and then to the third, and so on. This Sanctum's portal reacts to powerful magic such as this artifact, so as you find each piece, this portal will lead you to the next. No need to use another key. The most recent piece of the rod will suffice. There's no time to waste. Once you've reassembled the rod, we can all confront Vecna and stop his heinous plan. You'll be the heroes of the multiverse. Now how does that sound? Again, this is Kos the Betrayer, disguised as Mordenkainen, telling your party this. And that is the kicker that sets off the entire rest of this campaign. You then go to many different places across many different worlds, searching for each different piece of the Rod of Seven Parts, and then once you've assembled the rod all together, you then go and fight Vecna. And this is where Vecna is at its best. Each one of these different jumping locations are really cool and unique and very different from each other, and after each one, it's kind of episodic based, where you will come back to this sanctum in Sigil, rest, recuperate, get your bearings back, get another powerful piece of the artifact, and then go on to another adventure. And of course, some of these chapters are better than others. I have my favorites and I have my least favorites, and they will be different than other people who have played and run this game. Well, let's go in order. And the first place we're going to is back to Neverwinter, except we're going underground. Before we get into the story overview, I want to talk about the marketing behind this book and how it was not exactly misleading, but definitely overhyped and a bit of a false narrative. Because as the book was coming out, they kept on talking about how it was tied in to these obelisks that had been appearing in other adventures. There was one found in a Nether East city in the Rime of the Frostmaiden campaign, and then there was one blatantly obvious in the Lost Mines of Phandelver reboot they did, the Shattered Obelisk. And apparently there was other ones in other campaigns, I don't remember, but they were all supposedly tied to the coming back of Vecna, the foretelling that Vecna was coming back to life, and this was all, you know, Easter eggs and lead-ups to this big reveal. Only for absolutely none of those locations or any of those obelisks at all to appear in the book ever. Not a single thing in this entire book references any of those obelisks or has you going to any of those locations at all, which is a huge missed opportunity, because if they did that, that would have been really, really cool. It would have been really neat to tie this book back to those other adventures like they said it did, even though in actuality, it doesn't do that at all. You can pick up this book, run it from cover to cover, and not have run a single other pre-written in your entire life, and you won't miss anything. Because you do a lot of globetrotting in this book, and I mean a lot. You travel to a ton of different really cool locations. So I just want to get that out of the way. If you thought this had anything to do with those locations or those obelisks like Wizards said it did, it doesn't. So with all that said and done, your party then is given the first location for the first Rod of 7 Parts pieces, and this is where the core bulk of the adventure begins. And it's actually quite fun sometimes. Each piece of the Rod of 7 Parts is in a completely different location on completely different planes of existence. The first piece is in the Underdark somewhere in the Sword Coast. The second piece is in space. Yes, space. You get onto a ruined Spelljammer ship that has crash landed into the heart of a dying space god, and you find it within this space god. It's in the space god because it was on the ship when it crashed into the space god, but it got lodged so far into the god that it ended up inside there. The third piece is in Eberron. More specifically, it is in the Mournlands of Eberron, and it was used to power one of those giant ballista walking Hulk creatures. Actually, what the hell are they called? War machines. I thought they were called something much cooler, but it was powering one of the biggest war machines in the Mournland. The fourth piece is in Barovia. And you would think Castle Strahd, right? Where Strahd has it under his control? No. It's in the Death House. We'll get more onto that topic later, but yes, the fourth piece is in the Death House in Barovia. The fifth piece is actually, surprisingly, in Dragonlance. I say surprisingly because the last pre-written campaign, Dragonlance Shadow of the Dragon Queen, didn't sell too well according to Wizard sales, so I was surprised that they put another piece of the Rod in Dragonlance and had people return there. A welcome decision by me, but I think it was probably surprising for most people who didn't pick up that campaign or just don't know about Dragonlance that well, because it is showing its age. The sixth piece actually goes to the world of Orith, where Mordenkainen is from. Does that mean you get to find the real Mordenkainen? No, not quite. You go to a deserted island, where you find the Tomb of Wayward Souls, which is made by an Asirak clone named Rearrak. And Rearrak has just been hoarding this piece of the Rod in his tomb forever, because Asirak told him to do so. It's a little wishy-washy, but it's basically just, you want to do Tomb of Annihilation, but watered down and not with a Asirak? Tomb of Wayward Souls. And the seventh and final piece of the Rod is in a casino in Hell. There's a very cool bard character who runs a casino in Hell who is trying to use this Rod of the 7 Pieces to remake a dragon to honor Tiamat. It is probably the most different out of all the different locations for the Rod of 7 Parts, where you have to do a lot of gambling, there's a little bit of espionage, a lot of roleplay depending on your group and how they go about things. And I will say, based off the last 6 places you went to, the 7th final piece being a casino is quite refreshing. A casino in Hell, so you know, not everything's above board, but it was still quite fun. But once you return back to Sigil, which I should mention, you've been going back to Sigil every single time you get one of these rod pieces in order to just, you know, recuperate. Sigil is your safe home. It's your bonfire hub. Every time you are done with one of these chapters, you come back to Sigil, you get some downtime, you rest, you recuperate, and then you go back out and find another rod piece. But once you've got the 7th piece and you come back to Sigil, what happens now? Well, the betrayer is revealed. Because you see what happens now is that Cass takes the Rod of 7 Parts and uses it to find Vecna. But what he actually does is he opens a portal to Pandemonium. Why Pandemonium? Because in Pandemonium, there is this humongous, god-awful creature named Miska the Wolf Spider. And Cass needs Miska and those who follow him in order to fight and defeat Vecna. Cass doesn't believe he can defeat Vecna on his own, so he's going to free Miska the Wolf Spider, who is imprisoned using the Rod of 7 Parts, and therefore can only be unlocked and freed with the Rod of 7 Parts. Now thankfully, after he uses the Rod of 7 Parts to go to Pandemonium, the portal to Pandemonium just stays open in Sigil, which I need to point out something that maybe some of you grognards have really honed in on. Sigil, the City of Doors, shouldn't have any random portals opening up in it that the Lady of Pain doesn't already know about. Because in Sigil, nobody can come in or out unless they come through one of the pre-made portals already there. You cannot make new doors in the City of Doors. There's a pre-arranged amount, they are in pre-arranged places, and you cannot make more. And also, no gods of any kind can come in or out of Sigil whatsoever. The only god in Sigil is the Lady of Pain, and it's not even sure if she is classified as a god herself. She is purposely mysterious. But the point is, the book never outright talks about the portal within the sanctum of the Wizard's Tree that you've been using to go in and out of Sigil this entire time. I'm sure it's just assumed that the Lady of Pain is fine with this portal being here because it's never brought up ever. But where it starts to really push that boundary is when Cass, who's pretending to be Mordenkainen, opens up a brand new portal in Sigil to Pandemonium using the Rod of 7 Parts, which under all known lore for Sigil should not be possible, and is never brought up why he could do that. The Lady of Pain also doesn't once appear in this book ever. She's not even fucking mentioned, which blows my goddamn mind because you spend half the campaign in Sigil. Technically you spend the entire campaign in Sanctum. You don't ever leave Sanctum to even go shopping or anything. You're just stuck within Sanctum the entire time. There's not even a door that goes out of this sanctum. The only way in and out of this sanctum is the portal that you're using to go find the Rod of 7 Parts. Now, if you're like me, you let your players go into the City of Doors, do some shopping, talk with the locals, and do some stuff like that. And you also involve the Lady of Pain because you're using portals in the City of Doors, and then suddenly a brand new one is created under her very nose. So I made her get involved. But it is one of those things where if you're really in tune with the lore and everything, Cass shouldn't be able to do that. But nonetheless, your party goes through the lingering portal left behind and open by Cass, and they venture into Pandemonium and find themselves in the middle of an ongoing war. Not the war between Cass and Vecna. That hasn't happened yet, but there's another war between Lolth, the Spider Queen, and all her forces in Pandemonium, and Miska the Wolf Spider and all his forces. And you can choose to get involved in this conflict if you want. You can side with Lolth and her forces and try and destroy Cass and Miska the Wolf Spider, or you could join Miska, try and free him, and then take over Lolth's forces. Or you can do what my party did and befriend everybody with a lot of really good role playing and really good dice rolls. The book doesn't say you can do that, but you're God. You can let him do whatever the fuck you want. But the way the book wants you to do it is that you either befriend Miska and his forces, or you befriend Lolth and her forces, and then using either side, you then go and fight Cass the Betrayer, and you destroy Cass. And now, quite conveniently, the doorway to where Vecna is weaving his ritual of reawakening also happens to be in Pandemonium. Fancy that! So depending on what side you choose, and depending on whether you defeat Cass or befriend him if you're my group, you then find your way to the Cave of Shattered Reflections, or whatever the fuck it's called, and you find your way to the ritual of reawakening that Vecna is currently running. I know I've said that wrong, probably a couple of times. Oh well. Now at the end of the video, we'll talk about the things I liked and the things I don't like, but I need to point this out right now. There is a huge problem with the way Vecna is introduced in this chapter. Your party at this point, by the way, is level 20. This is the second adventure in all of 2014's rule set ever made that takes you to level 20. Your characters are effectively demigods. You arrive at this Ritual of Reawakening chamber. I can't say it right, it is what it is, and you haven't met Vecna yet. You haven't seen him, you've only heard his name. He is the big bad. You've heard him countless times. You've been doing this entire thing to stop him from weaving everything into one single timeline and destroying everything he doesn't like. You know Vecna exists and you know you need to destroy him, yet you've never met him. There's a villain archetype for this. I don't know what it's called, but it's like the unseen villain, but like everything about him is all in the name itself. It's very similar to how like Voldemort works in Harry Potter, where most of the cast never ever meets Voldemort except for like through wisps of smoke or morphed onto the back of Professor Quirrell's head. But most of the time, Voldemort is just a fearing name. He's just a presence and a namesake that makes everybody just shake with fear just from the idea of him. Vecna works in that very similar way. So it seems very weird. I kind of understand where they're going from, but nonetheless it seems very weird when you finally make it to this ritual area and you happen upon Vecna and he doesn't care. He is floating in space in a trance of his own design and he doesn't acknowledge that your player characters are there at all. He's got too many things going on right now. He has bigger things to deal with. He does not give a shit that your 20th level characters are in his actual realm. You think I'm joking, but let me read this verbatim. Vecna the Archlich is weaving his ritual of remaking. He is too focused to pay the characters any mind unless they confront him directly. And the description you're supposed to tell your player characters is this: levitating the center of the crystal chamber is a skeletal person wearing kingly vestments. Vecna the Archlich. Vecna's desiccated head is thrown back in concentration. His wrinkled eyelids are closed, with one drooping over its empty socket. His shriveled lips are pulled back to reveal rotten teeth. Vecna spreads his arms, one with a missing hand, and murmurs in a profane-sounding gibberish while a lightless orb swirls in front of his chest. It grows bigger by the moment. You get that very cool introduction, only for him to then do nothing. Because again, he is weaving his ritual of remaking. He is too focused to pay the characters any mind unless they confront him directly. You know what that sounds like to me? Hey everybody, power up your hardest spells and fire them all off at once and get a shit ton of damage off in one go before we roll initiative. Now the chamber is somewhat cool from in terms of a combat standpoint. There's some cool portals and different rooms you can go into and explore, but most of your player characters aren't gonna do that. They're gonna find out where Vecna is and they're just going to hard focus all their attention on Vecna. Because duh. There is some smaller mobs that come into play in this combat that you can have your characters deal with called mirror shades, but they're really not that strong, nor are they anywhere near as important as Vecna. I really think the creators should have taken a lot of inspiration from campaign 1 of Critical Role and how that ended with Vecna and that fight, because that was a way, way better way to end a long narrative campaign with Vecna as your main villain than this was. But nonetheless, your player characters finish off Vecna. They either defeat him by dropping him to 0 hit points, or they can use a magic item they got back in Sigil called the Chime of Exile, where if he's under 50 hit points, they just ring that and it banishes him back to Orith without any saving throw at all. But nonetheless, that's how the campaign ends. You either defeat Vecna and his respawn timer begins, or he's banished back to Orith for an untold amount of time, and your heroes are the saviors of the multiverse. So, what do I think? Well, like I mentioned, I do like the book, but it does have some weaknesses. I'm gonna talk about the good things and the bad things kind of interwoven instead of just one heap of good and one heap of bad. The first bad thing is that I get what they were trying to go for in terms of Vecna being too busy making his ritual and just standing there all godly like doing his thing without ever acknowledging the players. I understand what they were going for, but it was wrong. I get that you wanted to make him seem completely otherworldly, like he is too big to care and he has too much power to even acknowledge your character's existence. I get that, but it doesn't work. For one, it gives your entire group a chance to just absolutely blast the motherfucker right from the get-go with a huge amount of damaging spells before they even roll initiative, because again, he's not doing anything. Two, you've been building up this fear of Vecna this entire time. Your party knows, both outside of the game and in-game, that they have to reach maximum level and get all these cool things in order to find him and then defeat him. They know they have to do all this, and all the while the fear is building and building and building. Because you fight all of these crazy monsters and crazy characters throughout all these different chapters, and you scratch by the skin of your teeth on every one of these encounters, and you have that thought in the back of your head that at the end of this campaign I have to fight Vecna, and he's gonna be harder than all of this. And then he's just there, and it's not scary. I'm not saying the way I did it was better, or that, you know, I recommend everybody does this, but I'm just going to explain what I did and why I think it worked better for my group. Every time they went through the portal to find one of the pieces of this rod piece, sometimes, especially in the early games, because they have this link to Vecna, Vecna would speak to them in their minds. He would whisper things like, "You're going to fail, you can't stop this," and the portal would warp reality around them. It would have lightning and a ticking clock. Just building that dread, knowing that Vecna knows what you're doing. He knows you're after them, and he doesn't give a damn, and he's telling you you're going to fail, and just putting this little bits of doubt inside you, instead of just not giving a damn. I even had a watered down version of his stat block show up while they were transporting through the portals at the end of a fight they already dealt with, and then have a simulacrum eventually of him show up and be like, "Hey, you need to stop, because if you don't, this is what's gonna happen," and that simulacrum fucking ruined him. And I told him out of game as well. I was like, that was not his full stat block. That was a taste of it. Because I felt it built up this idea of Vecna so much more than just hearing about him. Yes, just hearing about him works, but it's ruined by the reveal of him, once again, just being a floating dude who doesn't give a damn. But anyways, I've talked about that long enough. The fight itself, hard. Vecna's stat block hurts. Absolutely, the man hurts. But there could have been a few other things going on in the fight as well to pull the attention away from Vecna to move your party around. Because the action economy is a very good way to tell if your party is going to win or lose a fight. What side has more actions? But in an interesting twist, they don't give Vecna legendary actions. He doesn't get those. Instead, he has a shit ton of reactions. Now, like most high-level monsters, he does have legendary resistances, and he does have 5 of them. Most only have 3. He has 5. But the thing is, most creatures at high levels get legendary actions, an action they can use between the turns of people that they're fighting. And this really helps offset the action economy, because now instead of your character going, the monster going, and then the rest of your characters all going, it can now go your character, the monster's turn, your character, the monster then gets a similar turn with a legendary action, your character's turn, and then it gets another legendary action and back and forth. It keeps actions on a similar level so that everyone gets to do roughly amount of damage to each other. Because if you get 5 turns to damage me and I only get 1 turn, I better do a shit ton of damage in that 1 turn to make up for your 5 turns. But if I whiff my roll or you make your save, that's all gone a wash. Now, like I said, he does get 3 reactions instead of just 1 reaction like most, but even those 3 reactions are not as strong as they should be to make up for his lack of legendary actions. I would give him more reactions, which is what I did. I gave him 5 instead of 3. Or I would just make more monsters involved in the actual fight itself. And not like small mobs either, like strong, powerful monsters that would probably act as like final bosses for level 16 or maybe even 17th level characters. Again, your party is 20th level. They have access to bonkers shit right now. Throw shit at them. Don't worry about killing them. They can get back. Trust me, I tried. That's enough negative. Let's get to a positive. I really enjoy all the world hopping this book does. It keeps things fresh and interesting. You are never bogged down with feeling samey the entire campaign, which can happen if you run Curse of Strahd and you're not really into horror or gothic details. That sucks, because you're stuck in this fucking campaign for 10 levels. Every location you go to in Curse of Strahd is a bit of a Debbie Downer. Now, of course, I love Curse of Strahd. I think it's one of the best pre-writtens ever made, but I also love that aesthetic. And if you don't love that aesthetic, you probably shouldn't be cursing Strahd. You probably shouldn't be playing Curse of Strahd to begin with. But even if you love that aesthetic, or you like the idea of it, and then you play into it, and then you get bored of, you know, the samey kind of dreary idea of it by level 5, you got 5 more levels of it. suck it up. That doesn't happen in this campaign because, like I mentioned, you start in Neverwinter looking for a cult. After that, you then go to the Underdark. After that, you go to Spice. And then you go to Barovia. And then you go to a dungeon crawl, and then you go to Hell, and then you go to Dragonlance. Not in that order, but you get the idea. It's new and it's interesting every single chapter. And you spend at most maybe 1 to 4 sessions in each one of these locations at most, which is another neat point that I'll point out. This campaign, from going from level 10 to level 20, you'd think it'd be exceptionally long, but it's really not, because you level up after you find one of these rod pieces every single time. So you're only spending about 1 to 4 sessions at a level before you then level up again. Most campaigns, as you get higher and higher in levels, the distance between your level ups gets longer and longer. Not here, which is very fun because it means that you can play a high level campaign and you can experience getting to 20th level in a relatively short amount of time, which is something most campaigns don't have. Most players barely ever make it to 10th level. The vast majority of campaigns, both pre-written and homebrew, start their players at level 3, and most of them never see double digits of their level. This one, relatively short, relatively easy to run. You start at 10th, you end at 20th. Moving on to another bad thing though, not every one of these locations is as fun or unique or as interesting as the previous one. I'm not gonna rank all of them, but I'll give you an example of like my favorite, my least favorite, and like mid-tier. I have a two-way tie on my favorite locations. One of them being the Avernus location where the last piece is found at the casino, and the other one being Eberron, where they find it in the War Colossus. The Eberron location is so unique and interesting, be it that it takes place in the Mournland, which has very little lore written about it, because it's meant to be an area for writers and dungeon masters to create their own reasonings for what has happened there. Now granted, this does give a little bit of a sneak peek into what could have possibly happened there, but it doesn't make any of it canon. It basically says you could run any of these 3 ideas and that would work, or you could make something your own, and I think that is super awesome. Sometimes when a game tells you to make it up for yourself, it doesn't work because it doesn't give you enough foundations to build off of, but in this one, it gives you enough about Eberron and the Mournland to then decide, and now that you have all this information, you decide what happened here. Here's some ideas, but you don't have to use them. And I think that's awesome. And the casino is such a breath of fresh air after falling through all the other places. You go here and you get to just relax, gamble, bet, fight in the Colosseum, go through a twisted horror maze, all these fun little things to do to make enough coins to then go and buy your way into the VIP lounge and then go and find the Rod of 7 Pieces, or a piece of the Rod of 7 Pieces, whatever. A chapter I found kind of would be something like Dragonlance. As happy as I was to see that they were going back to Dragonlance, especially after the last Dragonlance didn't do so well, the area they picked and the story that's told into it, I could take it or leave it. There's a really evil witch lady who is trying to use the power of all 3 moons of Kryn to summon something or do some dark ritual to overthrow a rival gang of werewolves. And by doing so, she has made it so that werewolves automatically transform anytime they're around her or her castle, and they just go berserk and completely feral. And you're asked by these werewolves to help stop her so that they can live normal lives and not have to be forced to become transformed into werewolves all the time when they're near her. And you decide to do that because you're good, honoring people, and you go fight her, go through her castle, dungeon place, eventually fight her and defeat her. It's fine, it's nothing amazing, it's not terrible either, it's okay. But a chapter that I really don't like is Barovia and the Death House. Why? If you watch my Curse of Strahd review linked up here, you know I don't like the Death House. I think it's a really, really poor introduction campaign or an introductory chapter to a fucking stellar campaign. Wizards does these introductory chapters for most of their books. They have one in here where it's just to fast track the players to the certain level that you want them to be so that they can experience the rest of the story. And in Curse of Strahd, it's the Death House, where you're running from levels 1 to 3 in a dungeon inside a house. And it's awful. And the thing is, you never come back to the Death House in Curse of Strahd to begin with. You start in the Death House, you run through this shitty dungeon, and then once you leave it after level 3, you then experience the best adventure ever written, and you explore all these really cool, unique locations with really dope NPCs, and you never, ever come back to the Death House ever again. And it's not like you don't need to. No. The book doesn't make you. You've already experienced the Death House. You don't need to come back to it. And I get it. The Death House is iconic, but goddamn, did we have to go back to the Death House again for the last campaign of the old rules? They took the Death House, and albeit they made it better, but out of all the places in Barovia, why did we go to the Death House? We could have gone to the ruined castle where the silver dragon sleeps. We could have gone to Baba Yaga's cool little lair area thing. We could have gone to the old bone grinder. I wouldn't have been happy about it, but I would have been more happy about that than going back to the goddamn Death House. Or we could have just gone to Castle Ravenloft itself. Why in the fuck did we not just go back to Castle Ravenloft? Castle Ravenloft would have been so much better than taking the level 1 to 3 Death House, making it for level like 13 characters, and just doing that. It's better than the Death House adventure in Curse of Strahd, but not by much. I still think it is the weakest of all the chapters. I'm gonna try and wrap this video up because it's almost an hour long, god damn. I overall think this book is about an A-tier product for me. Did it live up to its hype? No. Not in the slightest, because the hype was built around all these other books involved, and it didn't account for any of them whatsoever. It was Wizards basically outright saying, hey, we've been planning this book for a while, look at all the sneak peeks we've been giving you about this book coming out, but then the book referenced fucking none of it. The way Vecna is introduced at the end, not that great. It could have been done way better. Again, understand why they did it that way, but I don't agree with it. And some of the locations for some of the Rods of Seven Parts are not as good as some of the other locations. But all that said, I think the strengths this book has still heavily outweigh the negatives. Each location is fresh and interesting, and you go through levels at a relatively decent pace. It's not super fast, but it's not agonizingly slow either. You know exactly what your goal is for every single mission, and you know exactly what you need to do to get your next level up. It's never ambiguous or uninformative. Most of the encounters in this book are also relatively well matched for the level your characters are going to be at, which is astounding considering this goes from level 10 to 20. And as my last pre-written adventure that I've ever run, am I happy it was this one? Yes. I think this was the perfect adventure to end my string of pre-written campaigns and playing with only the 2014 rules for the past 8 to 9 years. Having all my players play characters from previous campaigns that they didn't get to finish and then got to finish in this game was an incredible idea, and I'm so thankful we got to do that. And even some of the characters that came to the table at the very start didn't make it the whole way through. We had 2 character deaths in this campaign, but that didn't deter anybody from continuing playing. They came back with other characters that didn't get to finish in their campaigns, and eventually everybody got to tell an end to their character. And I think this was the perfect adventure for that. If you've never played a high-level campaign and finished a game at 20th level and you're looking for one to do it, I would pick this one. I would definitely pick this one over Dungeon of the Mad Mage, which is the only other campaign that goes to level 20. This one is so much better. But with that, that's the end of my pre-written adventures. And now I'm off to my new chapter. Now, some of you might already know what that new chapter is because you've seen what's behind me before. But if you don't, I'm running my second ever homebrew campaign, and I'm doing it live for you guys to watch and enjoy. By the time you're watching this video, I will have likely gotten several episodes already out on this YouTube channel for you to watch if you want to. Now, I know it looks like it if you look at my string of uploads, but I don't want this YouTube channel to just become only coins, cards, and crowns content. I want it to still primarily be me making videos like this, alongside also having coins, cards, and crowns every Monday. And not everybody is going to like watching 3 to 4 hours of live D&D content alongside well-scripted and edited, I think, videos like this one. And that's okay. If you don't want to watch those, you don't have to. But I would really love if you gave it a shot, because I put a lot of work into it, and even if it doesn't get any views, I'm glad to have something to archive it so that I can go back and watch it just for myself as well. So if you want to see us playing coins, cards, and crowns in this room and playing live D&D with the new rules, you can check out episode 1 here. And if you want to watch it live, we're on Twitch every single Sunday at 6 p.m. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Skål.